Hello, everyone. Welcome to Academy of Astrology UK. I'm Rod Chang, and today with me is our faculty tutor, Mandela Clay and Marcus Parchet. hello. Yep. So I think today we decided to go to the main topic. Oh, slowly delayed. I was go too quick. I have like a moon Mars, so I always bum, 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 bum. Okay, so we decided to go to the two episodes of about eclipse. First part is today. We're going to explain a little bit about eclipse in from the astrology and the astronomy view, and also general speaking, how we're going to look and explain in the eclipse, especially lunar eclipse. Okay, and then next week we will go to more specific on the November, because it's on the Friday. On that day, we'll talk about it because maybe some of us already feel it, something already activated. So that would be quite interesting to talk about it in more depth and more detail. So I will start with, because I love, to be honest, everyone, I think every astrologer choose the tool they like, choose the tool they enjoy. And very interestingly, or unfortunately, I don't know which way, but anyway, I like it. I love eclipse, from the solar eclipse to lunar eclipse. But it is kind of interesting because last week during our mountain track, we invited Dr. Benedict Brady talking about the eclipses. And then she gave me an idea which I was wondering since a long time, is the difference between solar eclipse and the lunar eclipse. The very basic astronomy. Okay, so solar eclipse is normally a new moon, and the lunar eclipse is a full moon. And it's a big joke because in Asian, especially in Chinese culture, we also have a lunar calendar. So the first day of lunar calendar is new moon, and the 15 days of the lunar calendar is the full moon. Interestingly, then one day a reporter say, "Oh, today is a lunar eclipse, and oh, just coincidence, it's the 15th day of the lunar calendar." I was like, really? You got this kind of astronomy sense? Anyway, I shouldn't criticize that because most people don't know about that. But indeed, the lunar eclipse is on the full moon day, and then so some astrologer use like say super new moon or super full moon. I don't really enjoy that term because there's so many things people want to apply it to super new moon or super full moon, like with the when moon is in the preach, so the moon was super big. And hello, Sue, moon is super huge. Then we will call it like a super full moon. So I don't really like the term, call it super full moon or super new moon. But indeed, it's like the new moon or full moon has a little bit more stronger impact. That's how I read it. I'm not going to criticize anyone still call it super full moon or super new moon, but I just think it's not super clear about it. And then when but in the astrology term, that's one thing is very different, is when the new moon happen around the lunar node axis. Either side, something like for the new moon is for the 19 degree-ish, then that's kind of 18 or 19 degree, then that's a solar eclipse. And when the full moon happen around the 13.5 degree around the nodal axis, and that's a lunar eclipse. I was just like struggling more and more. Because I was wondering when Sue going to chip in and say hello. So nice clothes.
I couldn't find your link, Rod.
Oh, I'm really sorry. Nice clothes. I like it. And a nice background.
Well, we're sitting. Look, I had a hole in the sleeve and I fixed it. And it was okay. That's it. I fixed it myself. I fixed a hole in the sleeve. I didn't take it to a dry cleaner.
So we are just talking about the very basic about the eclipse, include solar eclipse and lunar eclipse. So now I will pass to Marcus, I don't know why I call you John. I don't know what's wrong with me. Marcus, I don't know why.
John, hello.
I don't know.
Okay. It's fine. It's interesting because this eclipse is obviously in my across my ascendant axis, but I can already feel it. But anyway, yeah, just to follow on from you, that the main sort of traditional text on eclipses in my view, I mean, there's loads of traditional stuff written about eclipses. I think the most useful one is actually Ptolemy's Tetrabiblos, which was, I think it was originally written by Ptolemy, who was not King Ptolemy of Egypt, same name. I think he was some sort of like high up academic librarian in Alexandria. But it was originally written in the 1st century by him. And then the version that we have in translation, that's the one. Lovely, beautiful, amazing book, Tetrabiblos. Exactly that. And he also wrote an astronomy book called the Almagest, which I don't have because it's kind of like mind-bendingly astronomical. but the Tetrabiblos is it's actually a paraphrase or a cover version written by Proclus about 2 centuries later. Anyway, a lot of it is good old school astrology, but I think some of it isn't that useful. Because there are other ancient authors who I think have more to offer in terms of astrological techniques, but his chapter on eclipses is excellent because unlike many other parts of the book, which perhaps aren't so clear in their exposition of things, his bit on eclipses is very clear. So there are a couple of really useful things. He divides the eclipse, and I should have thought to bring the book with me, but I didn't today. He divides the section in eclipses, I think, into 3 or 4 parts. And the first is sort of, I may get these in the wrong order because I don't have it to refer to in front of me, but one section is about the class or kind that the eclipse affects. In other words, what will this eclipse affect? All these traditional rules for working out what kind, will this eclipse affect people? Will it affect agriculture? Will it affect animals? Will it affect the sea? Will it affect the weather? Blah, 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 blah. What? And then he has another little section on when will the effects of this eclipse commence? Because that's something that's really interesting that seems to have been forgotten in contemporary astrology a lot of the time. I mean, it's coming back in, but a lot of astrologers talk about eclipses as if they're just happening right now, of which in the sky they are. But traditionally, it was thought that the effects of an eclipse, while they might begin at the time of the eclipse itself, would not necessarily be at their full force at the time of the eclipse. The maximum onset of those effects may not occur till some months later. And he has a chapter on sort of working that out. And he also has a bit on how long those effects might last, whether they last for a couple of months or a couple of years or even several years.
I remember that when I beginning to study the eclipses, and I have a discussion with you, and it's you give me that very clear idea about if it's on its horizon. It happened very quickly.
And that's straight out of Ptolemy. It's one of those ideas that's so simple actually, but very powerful, which I think a lot of good astrology can be. It doesn't have to be mind bending. It can be pretty straightforward sometimes. Hi, Sue.
Sorry, could you in essence for the audience give a brief synopsis of what Ptolemy says about lunar eclipses? Can you remember?
Yes, I can. I mean, I'll try and give my cereal box version. Thanks, Sue. Yes, the biggest form I can. Yes, so he differentiates between solar and lunar eclipses in terms of their timing and effect. He says solar eclipses tend to last, their effects last longer, and lunar eclipses, their effects tend to last a bit less long. The bottom line for Ptolemy was that the major effects of any given eclipse would begin, or in my view, the effects always sort of start around the eclipse time, but they're sort of fully manifest depending where the eclipse occurs. So say the eclipse happens on the eastern horizon, on the ascendant, the effects would begin right now at the time of the eclipse. If the eclipse happens near the midheaven, in the middle of the sky, the effects will be fully manifest in about 6 months' time. And if it happens on the descendant, on the western horizon, Ptolemy said the effects will begin to be fully manifest in about a year, or will be fully manifest by about a year. And then he said that however long the eclipse lasts in hours, there is a nuance here, but for the sake of the previous brief explanation, let's just make it simple. In however long the eclipse lasts in hours, he said if it's a lunar eclipse, that many hours equals that many months. And if it's a solar eclipse, that many hours equals that many years the effects will last for. So say you have a lunar eclipse happening near the midheaven, then the full effects of that eclipse will be manifest in about 6 months' time. Whatever that chart is saying will be fully in show by about 6 months. And the effect, say that eclipse, the moon was eclipsed for about, I don't know, I mean, how long does the lunar eclipse last? An hour?
Yeah.
A couple of hours? Say it lasted an hour, then the effects might only last for a month following that eclipse.
If I remember, this one will last a little bit longer, I think. This one will last around 3 hours.
So if it's right.
Yeah, so it's pretty, for some astrologer, I heard about some astrologer talking about the next one coming on the 19th of November. They say will last kind of 3 hours.
So that's interesting.
It depends a bit whether it's total or partial. This is a partial, I believe.
Yes. I mean,
yes.
So it really does. And I think it would be using, I'm guessing, Sue, I think because it's ancient astrology, they'd probably be going by the visual appearance.
Yes.
So it'd be whenever you know what I mean? So it wouldn't be one of those astronomical things where the moon is kind of technically eclipsed, but actually it looks like a normal moon. It's got to be like the face of the moon is part. So as long as the face of the moon is at least partly occluded, then that would be counted. And the final point, and then I'll shut up and pass it over to one of you guys, but this bears repeating, or bears emphasizing. You may have noticed that all of those timings are only apply when the moon or the sun, whichever luminary is being eclipsed, is above the horizon. Ptolemy was very clear that when the eclipse happens below the horizon, in a part of the world where you can't see it, the eclipse will not be affecting that part of the world. It has to be visible. Now, that doesn't mean it can't affect a person living in that part of the world, because if an eclipse falls on a sensitive point in your birth chart, then it is going to affect you. But in terms of countries and regions and global events, you've got to see it in the sky for it to have any relevance to that part of the world. That's it.
That makes a lot of sense. I have to say something. I have to object to Ptolemy, I'm afraid.
Oh, go on.
Because, Sue objects to Ptolemy.
He's not here to defend himself.
Which is what concerns me about this idea that it can last 6 months or even a year, is that, excuse me, but in the meantime, there'll be 1 or 2 more eclipses that will occur. So they're all overlapping each other, in terms of effect for the rest for years.
But that's I mean, isn't that true of astrology in general? I mean, I don't think that's it's interesting though, Sue, because thinking about it, you could have you're absolutely right. You could have an eclipse happening on the freaking descendant, so the effects are fully manifest in a year's time, and then you could have one a month later on the ascendant. So it's like that one happens right now, but once you obviously sit down and do your interpretation and look at the world events, it starts to all make sense. It's like
I agree.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah. Mandy, how you read eclipses?
Yeah, well, just to sort of add to what's been already said about where an eclipse has its most of effect. You can actually go when an eclipse is coming up. You can actually see on astronomical websites such as NASA. I think you can actually see the eclipse path. So particularly if you're interested in mundane astrology, you can actually see where the eclipse is going to, the path of which it's going to take, i.e. where it's visible in the world. So that's very interesting to do and sort of track what might be happening.
Should I share my screen?
That line.
Should I share my screen? I'm on NASA now.
You have that. You have that. Amazing.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So if you go to NASA's data, there's a really useful, because not only they tell you when it's going to happen, what position and how long it lasts. Like this one tells us the start from the 858 or this conjunction is 858, and the great eclipse is 904. you know, and then like in their I think in their page they will tell you like this page they tell you this is a partial. This is a partial one. This is a partial one, but the last look how long, 3 hours and 28 minutes.
Okay.
And then you can see it from America, North Europe, East Asia, Australia, and Pacific. I think UK we couldn't see it because when it happened, moon is already lower the horizon. So yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Mandy. Sorry. I just like take it away.
Thank you. Thank you.
Really interesting. Yeah.
Exactly what I was saying, Rod. That's amazing. You prepared all that. You can see that information. That it's really worth obviously studying that. If anyone's interested in studying that, you know, in depth, because it's really interesting information, and you learn a lot about, you know, the astronomy of it all. But in terms of the astrology of it all, I think the one that is coming up has already been mentioned is a lunar eclipse, and it's on the 19th of November, which is in 1 week's time. And it is in the sign, the moon is in the sign of Taurus, so the sun is in the sign of Scorpio, so it's a you know, it's a fixed sign opposition between the sun and the moon. And I think, you know, if we're looking at sort of astrological themes to look out for, the axis of Taurus and Scorpio is all about attachment. It's about desire. It's about it's quite a sort of a deep sort of emotional. It's about what you desire and how you go about getting what you desire and what you're attached to, as I've already said. And I think that's the theme of those two signs. But the general themes of a solar eclipse in astrology is that it's often associated with the relationships in the way that any opposition is associated with relationships. So it's something to look at around relationships. It's also something to look at that I think is interesting about a lunar eclipse is that it's a full moon basically. Is a full moon is when things come to full light, but that full light of a full moon that's eclipsed, there's something that you can't see that perhaps you might want to see, something that comes to a head potentially. Those are some of the themes potentially to look out for. I think I'll let someone else talk about it, but I think the other aspect that we've got that opposition, that eclipse opposition, that lunar eclipse is in square to Jupiter. I think I'm right in saying.
Yes.
Looking at the chart, it's in square to Jupiter. So you've got to take into account a Jupiterian energy, you know, blowing things out of proportion, being over optimistic, grandiosity, all those kind of Jupiterian things to be thinking about.
Sue, how you interpret a lunar eclipse?
Well, it's very interesting what Mandy was saying, because that was one of the things I noticed about it when I looked at the chart that you put up. And of course, it's fairly close. It's 3 degrees, making a T-square with Jupiter. It does kind of alter it to some extent, because Jupiter being such a powerful planet. I mean, and the way I would interpret a lunar eclipse, it obviously will depend on the particular situation, but in general, it seems to be about something kind of coming together or separating, you know, where what Mandy said about relationships, it may be about relationships between organizations, not necessarily in mundane astrology. So it's like, you know, it's coming up in a week, and it's actually quite interesting, because one of the things that has occurred to me is that we're just coming to the end of COP26. And this eclipse does not occur for another week, but that's fine. In eclipse terms, that's all right. The effect is still there. And it's also connected with Jupiter in a square. And we've just had a gathering of many nationalities, the leaders of many nationalities. And there's something about the relationship that has or hasn't worked very well. You know, it's like ideas have been posited, things have been actually put out, thoughts have been indicated, but actually I'm not sure that it isn't just a lot of hot air. really. That's not a general interpretation, but it just struck me looking at it.
Yeah,
I saw on the news tonight about the COP26 finishing, and I thought, yeah, well, we shall see. So the idea being, it's interesting what Marcus said with Ptolemy having ideas that it might go on for 6 months or a year. Well, but if it has anything to do with COP26, it will.
This one, if Ptolemy's, I mean, if the estimate, it's all about, the effects will be fully manifest about 3.5 to 4 months after the time of the eclipse. So that's, and then he did, there was an extra little addendum to that. He said then, no, I tell a lie. That's incorrect, isn't it? The effects will last 3 or 4 months after after the eclipse. It depends where is COP26? Where did it take place?
Glasgow.
Oh, so they wouldn't have been able to see the eclipse from that place, would they?
No. They probably wouldn't even know that there
No, because I think our area we couldn't see it.
But that raises an interesting side question. I don't know if it's, if you can't see an eclipse from the place the event takes place, but the people involved in that conference are from various different countries which may be affected by the conference itself. Do you know what I mean? Or I don't know.
By the eclipse.
I don't know. Anyway, I won't carry on speculating.
Here's another observation, actually. If also, again, if we look at the chart again, you'll see that T-square also involves Mercury, and we've been talking about COP26. And Sue mentioned hot air, and a lot of people have been saying COP26 is all talk and no action. Don't forget, this is a fixed T-square on a full moon, on an eclipse. All talk, no action. There's lots of sticking points. Are they really going to follow up on any of this?
Shouldn't politicians follow astrology?
We all hope that.
Well, I don't. It depends. It depends which politicians, Sue. There's some I just wouldn't want to have that information. Do you know?
Manipulate it somewhat differently.
Yeah. But I think there is a
don't forget.
Yep. Mandy, don't forget, please.
Also got the also. Oh, sorry, Rod.
No, please.
No, go.
Bad man is talking over you.
No, it's not. It's fine. Go.
Well, I'm sure you will forgive my bad manners, because I was just going to mention that Mars is opposite Uranus, which is bad manners in itself. So there's astrology speaking for itself. But just to say that the Mars-Uranus opposition is still in play during this eclipse. And I think we talked quite a lot about Mars-Uranus last week. So you might want to...
So very basic things, I think, let's go back to the very general, because I don't want to go to too many dips. This chart is very hot, I have to say. There's a lot to talking about this chart. The first things, that moon is aligned with a fixed star Algol. And that is kind of sticky.
It's really interesting. We're going to come back and discuss this chart more next week. But one thing I want to say.
Good idea. We should do that.
One thing I want to say is, so how we decide this who or where, apart from the Ptolemy's method about where you can see it, where has impact. But another thing is, I think is on the like individual chart or the country chart. So that is related to you. Like, for example, Marcus say this eclipse is on this lunar eclipse is on your ascendant descendant.
Yeah.
And very luckily, they square my sun.
Well, now what's that going to be for you, Ron?
Who knows? I mean, it's actually the eclipse position itself is actually at 27 is pretty closely square my Saturn, because I think my Saturn and your Sun are in opposite.
Okay.
Great combination.
With a mutual reception and a trine to Jupiter from my chart thrown in as well, so it's not all
we adore each other,
We do actually. So it's all good. Don't take one aspect in isolation, but it's going to affect both. It's going to be squaring Rod's Sun and my Saturn, but that Mars Uranus opposition is almost bang on my ascendant. My ascendant is 12 Scorpio. So it's going to be picking both of our charts up in interesting ways.
Yes, we're getting quite busy, I think. So and it's interesting because there are a few countries. I think a couple of days ago I was in another group, and they some very great astrologer like Robin Ray and Christy. We are talking about there's a few country has this position on the angle. Israel has I think has some Jupiter or something on there, and then Spain has I think is like 27 either side on the ascendant, and then China's MC midheaven is 26 Scorpion.
Wow!
So all these big things.
Oh.
That's how when you put an individual chart or country chart, you just like,
That's actually really, really interesting, because one of the countries that's kind of stood out, not necessarily in a positive manner, but from the COP26 thing, is that, you know, they came in at the very last minute, 2 days before the end, to make a deal with America. They refused to be part of the whole thing.
Yeah,
so that's actually very interesting. It's on their midheaven. Wow.
This is also on Biden's ascendant.
What?
Son. His son. Biden's son.
So isn't the South Node pretty close to what degree is his ascendant? He's a Sag rising, isn't he?
I think he's Sag rising. I think. Yeah.
Is it an early degree Sag?
Let me check. Oops. Let me check his chart. We can always do that.
Just out of interest.
Yeah. That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Because obviously he being the president of one of the world's great superpowers at the moment, it's not trivial.
And becoming prominent in the way that I've just described.
Here we are.
Yes.
3 degree.
So the South Node is
right
So for
right
him,
on his sun.
It's his solar return. It's his solar return. Imagine having that eclipse on your solar return.
It would be so busy for him.
Well, I mean, the thing about the South Node in the ascendant is it often does weaken you a little bit, and there's been a few, like the last year, obviously there's been all reports about health and whatever, which to some degree those rumors always plague any old president.
Yes,
they're sort of pushed by opponents, but it's interesting that's
some astrologer really like he will have something to do, or maybe, you know, something going to happen on him. So I mean, could be I just don't want to stretch too much, but like it's falling on his sun. Yeah, there will be active something, you know, with his solar theme, you know. So that's how. Yep, Mandy.
You know, if an eclipse lands on your birthday, on your solar return, for example, I mean, we can kind of say with some assurance that life changes tend to come.
100%.
Can't say exactly what, of course, but without studying the chart in great depth, but it's going to be, you know, potentially life changing, but very certainly bring change.
I would hazard a guess that this is not particularly nice, but whatever, is because the moon is 8th house and the eclipse is falling in his 6th. You could potentially be looking at something like the onset of a difficult illness, let's say. Now, I'm not going to say that this is going to result in any particular outcome. What I would say is that it's very likely that there will be some difficult health issue arising.
To be honest, I don't want to say that, and you know, but this is astrology speaking, you know, and we try to,
Because that moon is quite close to Uranus. Look. Sorry.
No. His moon is zero Taurus. Yes.
Thinking about moon in Taurus.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry.
No, I saw what you did there, but I think, I mean, if it wasn't, the thing is, you're right, Rod, because these things can show up in different ways. So it could be like eighth ruler moon in the 6th eclipsed, could be difficult health condition. It could also be, because he's the president of a freaking country, problems with healthcare workers, or you know, issues with something to do with the healthcare workers he's in charge of. It might be that his dog gets sick. You know, whatever it is, it's going to be something very disruptive to him.
I think maybe for some other astrologer they will say, why you guys just wouldn't dare to say something like that? I mean, no, it's not me. That's not my type. You know, we have all different type of astrologer.
Sure. I mean,
you know exactly what the rules are in the States about sort of making comparative compulsory COVID vaccinations like we have just done here.
Yeah, because the thing is, he's a president, and the thing about astrology is we found when we did the eclipse on Trump's ascendant, the Great American Eclipse in 2017.
Yeah,
astrologers were predicting he'd be removed from power or something like that.
Yeah.
And loads of shaky stuff happened to him.
be honest, yes.
Loads of shaky stuff. But
He's still stood there.
The point about this is that you can see from astrology sort of what will happen and sort of when and sort of where, but very much the exactitude is well, it depends on what your philosophical position is.
Yeah.
It's you can't often see exactly what it is until the bus is starting to come over the hill.
I agree. I like it that your idea about until the bus coming. Yep. So I mean, I don't want to stay too long on that chart, but this eclipse will be. It's a very different view. Some astrologers say, well, this eclipse is okay, it's fine, it was a Jupiter flavor, but some astrologers say, look at the algo or something. I mean, we all focus on.
I think we should come back to this
next. Maybe we need to explain next week what algo really is.
Totally.
Definitely.
You need to do your fixed star thing, Rod. And I agree. I think there's some positives and some negatives in this.
Well, I can be very brief, or we should leave it for next week.
You can be very brief, but then maybe we should.
Okay. Yep. Algo. Well, I mean, there's a modern interpretation, or little bit I don't want to say traditional, but a little bit like a early 20th century's interpretation about the from Vivian Robson, or I think even William Lilly. He particularly focused on this fixed star, and he say it's kind of a most evil one. And then Vivian Robson say is related to violence and headless, or like the head being chopped off.
Decapitation.
So, decapitation. Because it is interesting because it's in constellation Perseus, and then this is the star represent Medusa's head. But in astronomy, it's very interesting because the algo is one of a particular fixed star. We call it a variant. So they change the light, and then we find out later it's like a 3 or 4 star. They orbit together. So when the dim one go past, so the light will get dimmer, and then when they move away and they get bright, so they call it the devil's wink or something, right? Like the devil is winking at you. Hello. So I think this big star, especially for me, that would be a very okay. If I don't go to the totally gloom, totally dark side, I would say it's going to surprise you. It's going to surprise you because it's like it changed very quickly. And also it is like Medusa's head, because what Medusa's head does in the mythology is petrify you.
Yes.
Make you stunned, make you shocking, and then you couldn't move. So
it's terrifying, isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
but it could also turn something into stone. I don't know what that means in English.
There's one positive thing for. I want to inject a slight. I mean, algo
please.
is a really totally everything you said, Rod. Like negative reputation broadly, but it was also used in some of the medieval sort of grimoires, astrological magic, and all that. It was one of the Bohemian stars, so-called one of the stars involved in traditional magic.
Yes,
and its uses in that symbolism in that was it was also a star associated often with great wealth.
Oh,
incredible wealth.
Oh my God.
It was also a star, I think, of protection. Like how gargoyles or the dragon's head was used as, I can't remember, apotropaic is the word. Apotropaic,
oh my God.
Meaning scary stuff that repels evil spirits.
I see.
So there's something about algol which is petrifying, as you say, but also it has to do with earthly wealth and scaring away the scary stuff.
I like this idea. Thank you.
There's some positive uses or inflections that you could gain even from this rather traditionally difficult star, let's say.
Yeah.
Oh
my God, this is so interesting. So I think next week we will go deep. I think we can, we all have some experience, because that's what that would happen on the Friday. So we will have the we will have our podcast, and that would be like a lunar eclipse already happened. So we probably have some idea. We will probably read from some news, about this lunar eclipse, how it affects us. So I think we will leave more detail next week. But if you have any question about the eclipse or even any question related to astrology, please leave us the message on our YouTube or on our Facebook website, and we can discuss on the our next Friday's episode. Okay.
Yeah.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you for watching our YouTube live stream. And I'm Rod Chung, and Sue and Marcus and Mandy. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Good
everyone.
night.
Night.
Good night.
Bye. 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 Bye.
Let me